Welcome to another B1 Contributor Hours. We had two topics in the agenda submitted by Pocket Blade, unless someone in the call wants to submit also an agenda item now that we're here all together. If not, we can go ahead and respond to Pocket Blade's questions, and he will catch it in the recording when we upload it. So I want to open the floor in case anyone has any topics or questions regarding B1. If not, we can head into the conversation around the topics brought by Pocket Blade.
Oh yeah, I don't think anyone else has any other questions. So Luis, how are you thinking of doing this?
Yeah, so I
Sure.
posted the topics, the agenda topics in the B1 research channel.
Hmm.
I was thinking I'll just frame the question and we can have a conversation around it, and that serves as content. And then if Pocket Play has any follow-ups, we can do it in another session or via chat. I think his questions are good content that it will be good for everyone to know. His first question was that he couldn't find any information on how the B0 to B1 transition will look like and how will the B1 genesis state be determined. And I can talk a little bit about that and just for anyone listening in the recording afterwards or the people present. The genesis state is basically the file that describes the initial state of the blockchain, which accounts have which tokens, which applications are there, which nodes are there, in the case of Pocket. So in B0, for example, the genesis state was socially coordinated. Um, the genesis file was updated throughout a period, and it was publicly posted in a GitHub repository where all the changes were open for everyone to see. And the way nodes accepted this Genesis file was by downloading it into their Pocket Core software and using it to kickstart the network. If two nodes have different Genesis files, they're not going to be able to come into consensus. So this step is actually crucial to bootstrapping the network in the first. I want to say that, and Daniel, correct me if I'm wrong here, we yet don't have determined what the technical implications of moving from B0 to B1 are going to look like in Genesis, but we can ensure that it's going to be more of an operational process rather than a technical one. If we go the route of socially coordinating the Genesis state as a community and then kickstarting the network at a predetermined time, everyone using the same Genesis file or state.
Yeah, so I'm going to jump in and say that it is still definitely an open problem and an open question around how it's going to exactly work end to end. We've discussed it many times and we have ideas, but most likely some sort of block will be selected by the community. We'll figure out the balance associated with each account there alongside other attributes of the chain, and then create a new Genesis file holding those balances. And this is obviously going to be social coordination, which is very common for other projects as well. And yeah, so if node runners, for example, do not agree with a certain block selection or what the Genesis file is defined for that block for some reason, even though it's in the chain right now, that'll be an open problem or discussion. And so we have a plan, we have an approach, and other projects have done something similar. For additional context, I think what I can do is, especially since I believe we're recording this, right?
Yes, we're recording audio and video.
Yeah. So this will just kind of be fun to show where we are with the Genesis.go file today, and then where we'll be at launch. So like right now, in the context of development for V1, so we have Genesis.go, and there's different actor types. So we have service nodes, we have applications, validators, fishermen, and such. And there's different ways for development purposes to load that Genesis file. You can either load it from a config directly. So let me kind of, and it's all defined via protobufs. So here, if we load the protobuf, a Genesis source can be a file, a state, or a config. For V1, when we do get there, it's going to be a JSON file. And that file is going to be essentially pointing to a state. So you can either define the state in code, or you can define it via JSON in the file. And in there, what we have are the actors, their attributes, and some parameters. And there's obviously a white space error down here, if anyone caught that. So like if we look at an example of what we use for local node development right now, here's what a test Genesis looks like. So we have validators with an address, a public key, what their balance and stake tokens are. And this is all likely going to change. But then if we, let me show another file that we use, config. Yeah, for some reason this one wasn't showing up. So here's what we use for localnet, and you can see we have all the different pools with some sort of amount. There's no fishermen or service nodes yet, and there's validators. So basically this is what it's going to look like, and the values that we put here in the final version of this will be based off on the state of the V0 blockchain. So this might have been a little bit of a tangent, but hopefully still interesting or useful information for someone else who looks back on this.
Yeah, and some other projects have used things like for example, a smart contract chains have used something like, oh, we have a smart contract and an oracle that reads the chain on every call and migrates the tokens and things like that. But I think that level of complexity is not something that we need, especially because we are a predefined schema. It's not like people are uploading smart contracts to the Pocket blockchain. It's more like what we want to do is capture a snapshot of the state and bring that back to V1 and in a way that is sustainable. I think operationally speaking, there's multiple ways to go about it, but it's more of a social coordination challenge than a technical challenge. So if no one else has any more questions or comments to add to that, I will move on to the next question. So I'm going to move on to the next question. So the next question is, currently with V0, it's difficult to judge the network's power. And by power, I think he means like infrastructural power, and determine the current state of the network aside from benchmarking. Is there anything planned for V1 that could help us better determine how provisioned the network is for the DAO to make data-driven decisions? I think so. So the way I interpret this question, and Pocketblade, feel free to correct me when you watch this, is that we don't have a way of saying there are 100 instances with 4 gigs of RAM each and 8 CPUs each and however much disk space ready to serve in this software that has these benchmarks in that particular system, as you will have in Web2 applications, where you will have a middleware backend behind a load balancer with very specific metrics only made for that machine type, that processor type, that RAM, etc. So in this case, because everything is abstracted away behind the service URL, the network doesn't have an idea of how much infrastructure is actually behind that service URL of nodes. So one thing that I would like to say about this is the fact that uh, uh, before mainnet release, and I might be caught saying this quote in some tweet or whatever, is that I've always said that Pocket is like a social load balancer, where instead of having one load balancer with pre-programmed rules on how to deal with the traffic, Pocket has a social load balancer that uses incentives to expand and contract the infrastructure. I do see the value in having like a very measured uh, number or set of numbers that we could go and say, hey, the network can do this, and that roughly approximates to this amount of work that can be processed. However, you have to take into consideration that because it's a social load balancer, node runners might come up with innovations and things behind their interface, behind that service URL where they receive traffic, things like load balancers of their own, constricting based on the amount of pocket that is staked for applications, expanding based on the amount of relays that they get through their reverse proxy layers, and so on and so forth. So I think capturing that in real time might be a little bit tedious because you have to create an interface that everyone has to conform at the same time in order to be like, and when I say an interface, I mean something that reads the machine type, reads the hardware, reads the maybe even the resource usage of the machine at that time, and reports it back to like a central environment that processes those numbers. I think the way it works in V0, and it's going to be working in V1, is that in V0, because the blockchain tracks volume of work executed. Uh, right now, our best indicator of infrastructural capacity is it's the amount of relays that have been processed through the network. Like if we look at the current infrastructural capacity, that wasn't there 6 months ago, right? Like it had to be put in place uh, because the demand side kept rising and the relays kept increasing. So for me, that is like looking at it retroactively looks to me like a good indicator of if this is the historical performance and this is the trend of growth. We've seen that the network can catch up with the trend of work because the incentives are there. I think in V1, that retroactive lookup is going to be even better because it's going to have a volume, latency, and even integrity of the data via the fishermen. So what the fishermen are going to report in terms of test scores and availability also, and what the fishermen are going to report in terms of test score is going to give us a much closer look into the state of the infrastructure of the network.
Yeah, the only thing I'll have to add here, and we actually on the core team and I had a public meeting about this in this channel, was about the RPC spec, which is not yet well defined. But we do want to comply with open telemetry and kind of collaborate with the community on what the RPC spec would look like, and how that ends up being designed and implemented can very likely expose some of this data, and then someone can even build on top of it to collect this information that Pocketblade's asking about. So is there a well-defined plan right now on how we'll do this? I'm going to say the answer is no. Is there an optionality and especially an opportunity for the community to contribute and define this? Definitely yes. Luis, would you say that makes sense?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I think in a sense, a lot of the and this is only on-chain data, which we all know that on-chain data has to be the at least the least amount of data should tell you the most amount of information. So I think there is also a chance for off-chain for these actors, the fishermen and even the service nodes, to report data in different ways about their behavior via RPC, like you're saying, or even via other products or services that might exist in the V1 network, where you can plug in your node and contribute information about things that might not be part of the protocol to be reported. And then now the community can have an on-chain look that is committed by the actors who are committing this information, and then an off-chain look, which is maybe a more softer, up for interpretation look at the state of the network. So guys, those two were the questions that we had in the agenda. So I want to open the floor for anyone who wants to have any comments, discussion around the V1 project or how to contribute to the V1 project now. So I'm going to open the floor. Well, guys, then if no one has any more questions or comments, remember that we have an agenda link, which is a Google form where you can submit your questions, ideas to be discussed in the next V1 or V0 contributor hours. Remember, we're doing these interweekly, bi-weekly. So if that's it, I think we can wrap it up. Thank you so much for coming. And thank you, Pocket Blade, for the questions.
And thank you for moderating.
Awesome. Anytime. I'll be here every Thursday at 2 p.m.
I'll tweet at you if you're not.
I felt like a night show host saying that. Cool, guys. Thank you so much. I'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.